Hey guys, what's up? It is week 461, doing this a little early on Wednesday, so if your comment doesn't get read, I apologize. You can go ahead and post it for next week, or send me a reminder or something to read it for next week. But let's jump right into the reviews, and the first one up is from Visual Vengeance, and I was looking forward to checking this one out here. This is a 1990 shot on 16mm movie here, Highway to Hell, starring Richard Harrison, of course, from some numerous Shaw Brother movies early in his career, and not early, but at one point in his career in the 70s. And he also did a lot of really low budget movies. Richard Harrison was in some really like kind of cornball martial arts movies and ninja movies and stuff. He kind of became almost infamous with doing low budget kind of cinema and everything of that nature. He's not the main star in here, but he is most certainly one of them. This is directed by Bret McCormick, who actually I can't remember, him and his partner, they did like a couple movies together, and I believe he's the one who actually directed The Abomination from '86, really cool movie Visual Vengeance put out. He definitely had his hand in Ozone, Attack of the Redneck Mutants, and Replicator, and all those movies of that nature, which I think Visual Vengeance might have put out all those movies, so they obviously have some kind of ongoing deal with Bret McCormick here. So, yeah, this one is a bit odd. So you think like Highway to Hell on 1990, shot on 16mm, it's ups its budget. Previous films were shot on Super 8mm film, kind of in the Texas area and whatnot. So this is kind of a road kind of crime horror film here. We have this escape criminal right off the bat. He gets out and he kills a police officer, and he takes this woman hostage, and they're driving across Texas and whatnot. And Richard Harrison had a run-in with him years ago, so he wants to get kind of revenge on this guy, make sure he doesn't kill anyone, feels partially responsible. So that's kind of the plot here. It's up for this woman to survive while they run into kind of random characters along the road and whatnot, and he pretty much kills everyone he comes in contact with. To be honest, this kind of reminds me a little bit of the movie The Killer from 89-90, the one that TerraVision put out, but I feel like that movie's more supernatural, more slasher, more gory, just overall better product and better made movie. So this one, they had to remaster it, or basically take the elements from kind of a VHS tape. The elements are lost. So although many people may think this is SOV because of the company that's on the disc with it, and just kind of the label and stuff, this is actually not SOV. In fact, I actually made a mistake of thinking this was SOV. Bret McCormick does mention that this is the first movie that he made money right off the bat, and this kind of explains some of the issues I had with this movie in general. So when you're watching something what escape kind of criminal who's like a loudmouth kind of asshole, anger, there's always like these threats of like rape and violence and whatnot. So I'm going to watch something like an exploitation film like Fight for Your Life, or even something along the lines of like Murder Lust, or something in that vein, right? It's a rather tame movie besides the language and things of that nature. It's very tame, actually, and that kind of came down to they're selling it to multiple territories, and he had to not push the envelope when it came to violence. Now, having a regional kind of charm might push it forward for some people, but it definitely adds an element of bizarreness, I would say. And I saw somebody mention this movie as a surreal kind of film, and I don't really see it as a surreal film, but there's a couple scenes in here where you could kind of mistaken it as like I wouldn't even say mistaken, or look at it as a surreal kind of thing. It's just kind of a subjective opinion about it anyways. But every time our convict shoots his like 38 or something like that, a revolver pistol, things explode, including a helicopter and a car. So it's just bizarre, and it's played completely straight, and you're just like, what in the hell is going on? The odds of a helicopter exploding are 1,000,000 to 1. In that kind of that essence here, or shooting down a helicopter with that little pistol. But these things kind of tend to happen. I just think the movie kind of held back in certain aspects. The bad guy is complete overactor. He goes for the entire thing. He is screaming and yelling and just being an absolute ridiculous kind of guy. Richard Harrison, most of his scenes were kind of shot in kind of separate with another actor, where they'll just kind of cut back to them sitting in the office and having this conversation about him and whatnot. There is a funny kind of thing in here where they do mention that the director said Richard Harrison wasn't very happy with the way we filmed this one shot because we could see his bald spot on top, and he just didn't want people to see that. One of those kind of actors is like the king of the kind of partial comb over kind of deal, although he doesn't do this, but he does hiding the bald spot by putting his hair up, but to a certain extent, right? But everybody knows that Richard Harrison probably hasn't had hair for like 20-30 years, but so there's these kind of little fun tidbit stories. overall, this movie is kind of tedious for me because when you have like a low budget nature of that kind of element, you need something to kind of grab you in, and when you don't really have the exploitation that these movies kind of thrive on, or huge big cast or something like that, or immaculate acting. Not that the acting is absolutely horrible or anything of that nature, but you don't have the big names and things, so it's really hard to kind of keep my attention in this element like that. There's a decent kill count. There's a unintentionally kind of hilarious scene, but it also is kind of like cruel at the same time. Like this poor old lady kind of begs for her life, and it seems to go on forever. And it's like that point where it becomes almost like awkwardly weird. Maybe that's that little bit of surrealness that guy was talking about in his review. Overall, I'm not the biggest fan of Highway to Hell, and not to be confused with the 1991 flick where, with Hell Cop and Chad Lowe and whatnot, and Ben Stiller, which is a fun film. But there's a bunch of features on here, and I will talk about all the features before I talk about the bonus feature on this disc as well. We have an SD master from Tape Elements, commentary with director Bret McCormick, and that's interesting stuff to just even hear about how the movies were distributed and how he made money off this. We have an interview with the director as well, Red Hot Asphalt, actor Richard Harrison interview, Road Trip, actors Blue Thompson interview, Writing a Roadmap to Hell, screenwriter Gary Kennamer interview, actor Tom Fagan interview. So we have all these people just kind of talking about the movie in general, their experiences on the movie, working with certain actors, what they enjoyed, what they didn't enjoy, all that kind of stuff like that, kind of the rundown. Pretty interesting, decent stuff. And the bonus film here is Redneck County Fever from 1992. And this is kind of rare here. This is a Tempe VHS Cinema Home Video, but Tempe kind of distributed this as well at one point. But this had two films on here, and I believe Chick Boxer was a Tempe movie, and this was the one I bought it for back in the day with Michelle Bauer, but it also contains Redneck County Fever, those classic Tempe tapes, all the random colors that you'd get. But yeah, I think I watched Redneck County Fever once when I got this tape, probably 25 years ago or something of that nature, and it didn't leave too much of a lasting impression on me, but I most certainly remember Chick Boxer because the end is pretty gratuitous for just a very rather PG film. But Redneck County Fever is SOV, and they tell the story about kind of the director. Originally, he was then making this film, but then he got a call from his sister that their dad was sick, and he had to leave the set, and somebody else completed it. But that's a whole elaborate story about this. But basically, it just follows two kind of knuckleheads in the vein, from the words of the people who made it, not intentionally, but Bill and Ted kind of style characters that they weren't ripping them off. They just kind of felt that way, that these kind of two kind of goofy college kids end up getting stranded in kind of like the South, right? You think those other movies like that, like I imagine the title as alone is kind of reflective of like Macon County line and stuff like that. So obviously two kind of silly guys are stranded in the South running amongst weird kind of eccentric characters. It's definitely played for laughs. The casting is a little off, as even the director says, I had nothing to do with that. They kind of laugh about a little bit of it, like, well, this guy's supposed to be an old grizzled cop and he's like 20, and this guy's supposed to be huge and he's like 5'6", and just all sorts of things like that. The acting is not necessarily great. It is rather tedious, and it loses its steam pretty quick for me. But some people might enjoy this kind of weird comedy, not really horror, kind of double bonus feature on here. So I mean, it's a bonus feature on the disc as well. There's features with this as well. We have the Redneck County, the commentary track with that film, Bret McCormick and Gary Kennamer. Gary Kennamer, I think, wrote the other film, and now he wrote this one, and he partially directed this one. Bret McCormick stepped in to direct Redneck County Fever, and we have an interview there with Bret McCormick. Redneck County Fever interview with Greg Kennamer, and Visual Vengeance trailers. Take your own VHS sticker set. So we got a bunch of stuff on here, typical for the Visual Vengeance. Somebody puts a surreal and trashy killer on a rampage road movie. It rules. Letterboxd. Yeah, the Letterboxd reviews right on there. I do like the cover. I think it's pretty cool here. Pretty nice in a junkyard. But overall, not my bag, but I've seen much worse movies. But as far as the Visual Vengeance line, I feel like Bret McCormick's other films are a better place to start. The films he was involved with, like Ozone, Attack of the Redneck Musicians, especially The Abomination, which makes all things desolate, and is kind of like a classic when it comes to low budget, regional horror cinema from the 80s. This one didn't do much for me, but it did intrigue me a little bit. But I'm not necessarily sure I can give this a wholehearted recommend. But the special features are well worth it if you enjoy the films. The next one here is from Cult Epics Films, and it's a 1983 movie, but of course, it's not a horror film. This is an Obayashi film, and this is The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, 4K edition here. So, yeah, this one here, I had seen a lot of Obayashi's films, especially movies from this time with the kind of the teen idol actress shot in a kind of similar location by Kadokawa Films. So this one was one that had eluded me for a while. I think I had a DVD set, but I was happy to check out the Cult Epics 4K, which, I really love that they're releasing these stateside. It's great company with Cult Epics as well. So The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. This is actually based on, I think, a 1965 novel, which has been adapted a couple more times. There is an anime out there. But, so this one, it does vary a little bit from the book. They get into the special features when they talk about that here. But what we have is the opening. It starts off in kind of like a monochrome, black and white kind of style thing, which Obayashi is very similar to doing, right, with his films, especially like Houseu, which is his first directorial debut feature-length film. So we have these different kind of colors and black and white and stuff like his Motorbike Her Island, I think, jumps back between color and black and white as well, kind of in that vein. This one does have a lot of DNA with that, and also was the 1981 The Girl, the Drifting Classrooms. I think it's called Drifting Classrooms, the Drifting Classroom, which is a pretty cool film. But essentially what we have here is this young girl who, she meets this kind of guy on a skiing trip, and there's this whole big kind of like, kind of like nice little setup that you don't realize is actually going to pay off later on. But one day while she's in school, she kind of wanders into the lab, and she's exposed to these chemicals that kind of knock her out. And when she comes to, she's not quite the same. She seems to kind of go throughout her day, and when she sees something, she sees like a flash into the future, right? She goes to shoot a bow and arrow in class, and, she sees the bow and arrow land before it actually lands, so she stops. It's like, oh, I already did it. So all these kind of elements like that, but of course it gets a little bit more complicated when she starts to kind of like fall in love with this young boy, and there's another boy that's kind of interested. So we do have a slight love triangle here, but she starts to kind of like sense danger in people, and she's kind of moving forward and forgetting her time and place, and it's a very touching story. And I don't want to get into the points where I kind of spoil a lot, because the reveal of certain characters and certain motivations and certain time travels and stuff like that, it's fully based in sci-fi, but it's also like a romantic story. Very similar to, of course, a lot of Obayashi's films. What is the one that Cult Epics put out, where we had like the kind of the character who is like the kind of lone guy, and her island, that's his Motorbike Her Island. But there's one where I can't, they're all mixing up to me. This is really bad on my part, but there's one where a girl wants to visit the island that her father was so fond of. This island, I think it is of that nature, along that titles, and there's like these sad kind of tragic romantic characters, and there's definitely that element here as well. I really like the lead, if I'm not mistaken off the top of my head. He worked with a couple of the kind of teen idols, and I believe this was the same one from Sailor Suit Machine Girl, who, that's a fun movie from the early 80s as well, with kind of like a young kind of, that's not an Obayashi film though, but good one. So like what we have here is this romantic love story. Visually it's great, and it kind of comes together really well at the very end, and I think like the last act is probably the strongest act and the most emotional complexity of it, and his films are like that, where you set up these ridiculously tragic kind of circumstances, and they just definitely go for that like kind of heartache. The features on here are definitely interesting and well worth your time. There's a commentary by Obayashi scholar Alex Pratt, and he talks about his other films and the having similarities to this, and he even mentions some of the horror films, like the one he did the same year here, The Legend of the Catwoman, which is a great film and has some of the same actresses in there as well. He tells like the kind of long story about getting that actress to be in this and work in this film as well, because he felt like he felt like he wanted to work with her again after a great story about, unfortunately, her losing her house. Visual essay by Max Robinson. Now, Then, Here and There, the Amimichi Part 2, visual essay by Alex Pratt. Conversation with Nobuhiko Obayashi, and this is like translated directly in 2015. He died in 2021 or 2 or something along that nature, so not too long ago, but that's pretty interesting. He's definitely a wild and strange guy in the best kind of way, and I think listening to that interview, you can kind of grasp where he comes from to a certain extent, being such a wide array of films that he's done. As well as we have Japan Society New York, director Obayashi's archival interview, the Tomo Harada story, Tokyo O, the Kenjiro Sojo music video, theatrical trailer, new improved English subtitles, new slipcase designed by Sam Smith. Yeah, so a nice release. Now, it's a 67 novel, sorry about that, but where would I put this in the Obayashi kind of, oeuvre? I don't know. I mean, Houseu to me is more my style. It's a masterpiece of horror film and surrealism. Now this is surrealism. I know somebody mentioned Highway to Hell, but no, The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, Obayashi, tons of surrealism within his films. I really like The Legend of the Catwoman and Cute Devil, but some of his other stuff, I don't think I've ever disliked a movie by this guy. I think his films are powerful and impactful, and I've seen probably about 8 or 9 of his movies at this point, but this is a good one. Now, I'm not sure if I should have popped in the Blu-ray to check and compare, because this movie does have a lot of grain, and I'm not sure where the level on the 4K is of that nature, but it does have the HDR, and the sound mix is of course at 5.1 surround, which this movie has a lot of kind of special effects and digital, not super like elaborate effects like blowing up things like sound effects and stuff like that, but it's got a nice little kind of visual mix to it with special effects and decent sound and stuff. So I'd recommend The Girl Who Leapt Through Time by Obayashi, but it's going to be rare that I don't recommend one of his films. I've yet to come across it, to be honest. Okay, we're going to finish out the Japanese Godfather trilogy, and the last one here is Conclusion. Yeah. And as the other films go, I feel like as they go on further and further, we get more involved with the political nature of everything, and you kind of realize that the Yakuza is directly tied in with the political nature of this one. Oshi and Sakura both are back, the characters. Oshi from the last film is played by, of course, legendary actor Toshiro Mifune from The Seven Samurai and the other Kurosawa films of that. And so he's kind of a bigger character in this one, steps in to even a bigger role here. Bunto Shigawara is back playing a different character in this film. He plays 3 different characters in all the films, and this one he is directly kind of tied with Sakura, and he is in a wheelchair bound, and he has this long history about him. And the best thing about this was I popped in, just understanding the structure and why they decided to do it this way, is the writer of these films was talking about, in Japanese Yakuza in real life, the people who carry out the hits, the people who carry out the kills are thugs. And when you watch Japanese mobster films, it's never thugs. It's always somebody you know here. So what they wanted to do in these films was kind of get the whole scale of the entire organization. That's why you'll have a lot of young guys, I call them young guys, or thugs in these movies that carry out a lot of these kind of deals. And it's a through line throughout the entire series, especially in the first film. I'm like, why are we following this guy in a bar, kind of this young guy? What's his point? And then we'll see what he does and how directly he involves a lot of the fate of the main characters here. And we have one character that's kind of a smaller character in here, but that kind of through line is through here. Incho Yama, or whatever, the doctor from the previous 2 films, is also, you see like the stress. I would say the stress from these films, that person that is put in that second in command post, or given that huge kind of weight on their shoulders of the Nakajima company by Sakura, are the characters that tend to suffer the most in these films. And we've seen that happen twice over, and we're going to see it happening in this film as well, where we take a man who is supposedly a good man, a man who has morals and he has ambition, and see him absolutely crumbled like the other men here. And this whole organization, this Nakajima, is built on pride. It's built on, doing the right thing, anything for this organization. But in reality, it's just an ego trip for somebody. And I think that's a way that, the Yakuza people, they hide behind this honor in these films. But in reality, they're just using somebody to move themselves forward, and it becomes pretty intricate with these kind of 3 characters basically kind of playing 3D chess to figure out who's going to be the Japan's Don. And that's really what they're all there. It's all an ego trip that they want to be Japan's the Don of the Yakuza and all that nature here and stuff like that. But I do think a lot of the side pieces and side characters are the most interesting. I think that is refreshing, and I think it's pretty much the way you have to do this with leading with the main kind of characters and crime bosses, what happens to them. This movie can be a little bit confusing for a lot of people. They wanted the all-star cast in all these movies, so you recognize a lot of the people, but sometimes some of the bigger characters will bite it, or they'll change, and they'll come back as somebody else, and you're like, oh wow, there's like 5 or 6 the same actors coming back here, and I recognized a couple of them right away. I was like, oh, this guy plays a different character in here. He plays a different character in this place, but they keep Sakura the same and they keep the Doctor the same. Those are kind of like the through line throughout the movie. And there's another character that I find very interesting that is kind of destroyed by the Yakuza her father gets involved with and loses all his money. So she becomes like this basically property, and she has to sleep around and connect herself with these other kind of crime figures to survive. And it's a pretty depressing, sad kind of moment and that kind of stuff. Like the whole movie is just kind of tragic in a lot of ways, and you realize what the hell was this all for except somebody's ego trip. This disc here does have an interview with the writer who talks about meeting with real life Yakuza bosses and even sometimes doing the Godfather inspiring a Yakuza person to carry out a real life murder that was ended up being put in this movie. And that reminds me of the Radiance Films put out one of the Kinji Fukasaku's last Yakuza films, right? Where that movie being made actually on accident basically got one of the Yakuzas killed, right? Like this character, this real life character in that film killed. The Hoku Proxy War movie got this actor killed. Because they were like, oh, this fucking guy's still alive, and I guess the only thing you could compare that to is like Whitey, what the hell is his name? Whitey something, Whitey, the crime guys from Black Mass, right? After that, he was shortly killed in prison. So it's that element right there. But yeah, I would recommend checking these out. And somebody last week left a great comment about how the Japanese companies at this time were kind of just like how they were reflecting against like the World War II invasion. That's such a popular thing too. And Radiance Films does a lot of the Toei films and stuff like that, and you don't realize how important that whole war was at this time and on their cinema and stuff afterwards, like the Yokohama Blues. I mean, you do realize, but it is intriguing to look at it as an aspect, and a lot of the people that do kind of dive into these movies do. But overall, the Japanese Godfather series I would recommend if you're a fan of Radiance Films or Toei Films or any of the Japanese Yakuza films. It's pretty recommended. Good stuff. Okay, this one to be really quick here. I got kind of drug along to see this movie. I didn't know much about it, but it's How to Make a Killing. It's definitely a thriller kind of comedy deal here. So I don't know much about this one, and I was like, okay, I'll check it out. I got nothing to lose. So we go to the theaters, and I pop in, and Glenn Powell's an actor that I'm not super familiar with, and it also has the lead from one of the leads from The Substance, and I thought she's really great in that film. And the first thing I kind of take away from this movie is these are both good actors, but I don't think they're good enough to carry a movie with this kind of script, or maybe I just didn't like the script very much, but I just don't think that they're able to carry this film. So this film is definitely like silly and goofy, but it has I guess sense of somewhat groundedness. But right off the bat, we have this element of a character who is born to a rich family, but his mother was kind of pushed away from the family, so he has this vendetta. He's telling the story from a prison, so on death row, so you have that bookends and everything like that, and we kind of have his story unfold. And the idea is that how did he get here? What did he do to get here? And my problem with this movie is that although it is kind of a very kind of silly, kind of very have fun kind of element movie here, and sometimes I don't have a problem with that if it's done right and has the right tone. You can forgive a couple things because it just works. Like Send Help has some stuff that you're like, that's a little silly, but Send Help has that tone where I think this is almost like, it's not necessarily satire, but it's almost like varies on parody. And this one is just, it's goofy at the same time, but there's just some things that it's like, I don't even buy that in a goofy movie, to be honest. So like the element of, some investigation things, and after certain things have happened that they would get in trouble later, I'm like, I don't buy any of this shit, to be honest, especially with the way society is now. We can see that if you have money, you're not going to get in fucking trouble for the most part. A lot of people will not. So like, just overall, I don't want to spoil everything about this movie, but I think the acting was decent. I don't think the two leads are amazing. I think Ed Harris is good in it, as he should, but I'm not the world's biggest fan of Ready or Not, but if you want to see a movie about evil rich people, I'd rather watch Ready or Not, or a lot of films I think are a little bit better than this one. We talked that. And if you want to maybe get some of the kind of fun, kind of silliness, like kind of poking fun at different kind of like, I guess, class warfare movies or something of that nature, I would go with The Hunt, which I think is more fun as well. I just don't think this is a very good movie. I don't think it's horrible. I think it's right down the middle, kind of average. And this is a movie that does that kind of typical, right? Well, where they know their audience, or they think they know their audience, and they're like, well, we're just going to make all these rich people in this movie incredibly stereotypical and stupid, so over the top that people are going to cheer for them to die. But at the same time, they're almost like, not all of them are evil, they're just kind of rich and stupid and very one-dimensional, and I'm like, okay, I got this. And Ed Harris's character is a little bit more better painted than that, but overall, just kind of dumb movie. So I just felt like it was too stupid for me personally. Some people might get some fun out of it, but I did not forgive the stupidness to have fun. I didn't hate it, but I would not recommend it. How to Make a Killing. All right, let's get into those 1983 movies.
I have returned.
Okay. Show me.
Where is the music now? The sound of laughter. There was never laughter.
What's it like?
What's what like?
Screwing a psycho.
What the fuck was that?
It's gone.
God blows dead dogs. Just lay it in there.
Eat shit and die, Ricky!
Eat shit and live, Bill.
Yeah, Bill, he's a little wet.
31. 32. 32. Year of a man's prime. Loved by many women. He might still learn to swim. 32. Going. Gone.
The kid was cut in half, Arnie. They had to scrape his legs up with a shovel.
Well, isn't that what you're supposed to do with shit? Scrape it up with a little shovel?
One final moment of revenge.
Wondering what's real. All of it is real.
You want to see something really scary?
You bet.
Really?
Yeah.
Get the Videodrome! Long live the new flesh!
No choice but to kill the son of a bitch.
Living one's entire life in a state of fear. It is all I have ever known. Fear.
Are you ready?
Okay, go ahead. What are you doing?
All right, so first up now, this is listed as 84 everywhere except Internet Movie Database, and I don't know if there was a private screening amongst cast because this movie really didn't go theatrical. It was released on VHS in 84, but I gotta go by Internet Movie Database, my rule, so here we go. Fatal Games, 1983 slasher movie, of course the Olympic slasher film, very much in the vein of Graduation Day where we're focused on sports, but it very much has a twist ending, very similar to another slasher of this year, and anybody should know that one if they've seen either of those movies, but I don't want to spoil that movie just in fucking case, but it's not uncommon to endings like Unhinged or any fucking Psycho for that matter, really. And those weird kind of twist endings kind of, you know, I feel like it's kind of a continuation of Psycho when we get to that point. But Fatal Games here, so it opens up and it's got the best thing. It says winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. Yes, right, we have that high level of competition. Kind of like, what is the Fulci one? Murder Rock, right? You know, if you're not number one, you're nobody, right? If you're not the best, you're nobody. Kind of element here, which is what Troy Howarth pointed out in the New York Ripper, having that element in there, and I've been focusing on it every time I watch a Fulci movie, and it's there if you look at a lot of his films. But so we're watching Fatal Games here, and it opens up with this like, kind of this music and these fun montages, and we kind of have the best Olympic team here. It's also being an Olympic exploitation, and that's fun because we're going to the Winter Olympics right now, or are they over? I don't fucking keep up with it, but this is Summer Olympics coming in 84, so they're definitely focusing on that, and then we got this group of kids that are top notch, and they're going there, the 7 of them have passed, and of course, you know, people start getting picked picked off by a javelin kind of killer. He uses a javelin, which I absolutely love because it's the characters doing the javelin and stuff like that. Great murder weapon, although it does get repetitive. You're like, the first murder is so cool that you're like, I'd like to see a couple more, but just maybe different Olympic style kills. But we do have that javelin here and there kill. The one thing I did notice is, man, this movie is pretty sleazy, pretty gratuitous in the nudity. A lot of girls showering, a lot of kind of very sexy, horny movie, and I can appreciate that for a slasher from the 80s. I feel like a lot of slasher movies, that's why I don't care much for the 90s ones as much as the 80s ones, because they don't have the gratuitous gore or the sleaziness, and they don't all need to be sleazy, but I feel like there is an inherent kind of focus on the genre that is sleazy or gory or has something that pushes me a little bit further, like our whodunit. You can get away with not having that stuff if you have like a mystery element to the whole thing. But of course we have the director himself. I think it's Michael Elliott. He's also a writer and worked on some other things like that, and he's in here as like this main doctor, and he wants to push steroids on the kids, and that's a big element here too, right, where they're saying, well, all the people in Russia, and they're doing it, and Eastern Eastern Europe and all that, Eastern Germany and stuff, they're doing that. West Berlin, well, I don't fucking remember which one was on the other side of the Berlin Wall, but the one that was Russian controlled. Sorry about my terrible history here. West Germany, I believe. But so they're doing the steroids and stuff like that. We got to get an edge on them. We can't lose. So they're pumping all these kids full of steroids and all these things like that. So you're like, who could be the killer? They kind of pair off in groups and stuff. So I have a lot of romantic rendezvous. We do have a lot of shower scenes. Like I said, you'll see I think Brink Stevens in the background as a body double. Later you'll see Linnea Quigley as the lead character's body double. So you got some famous kind of body double actresses going on. Linnea Quigley was also in Graduation Day, which is pretty funny. But yeah, so we have all this kind of stuff going on, and the killer's picking them off. The first half of the movie is pretty fast paced. We got like 4 kills. I think it's well done, well constructed. The second half of the movie kind of slows down, and we have a lot of questions like, where's this person? Where's this person? Keep asking all these questions. You're like, bro, 4 people that are made it the Olympics team qualifying that are like trying out here are not going to just disappear without people fucking worrying about them crazily. But there's kind of like 4 head coaches there. We got the one guy who actually is the son of Joseph Megowitz, and he's part of the producing kind of squad. The commentary is excellent on here with Amanda. The girl who wrote the woman who wrote the TV book, Amanda. Why am I forgetting her name? And Bill Ackerman, who does Supporting Characters podcast. She's one of my favorites that does commentaries on things. Her Dark Knight of the Scarecrow commentary is top notch. One of my favorite commentaries. I'll read it on the back here. I'm having a brain fart here, but the commentary is excellent, where they talk about Louise Binwell and Megowitz's son both like producing and working on this movie and having their own company and stuff like that. So that was super interesting, to be honest. I didn't even realize that. But we got the 4 coaches here. One who's just upset he didn't make the Olympics. One who's like a lesbian having an affair with one of the kids, which is completely inappropriate. And one who is the nurse, and she's kind of Sally Kirkland. Which is crazy because she was in Double Exposure the year before as like a prostitute, so she's kind of doing her horror rounds here. Pretty established actress. And then we have the doctor. So we have these kind of characters, and we have all the red herrings as well. But yeah, the killer has a fun method, and the reveal, of course, is infamous for what it is, and not uncommon, but in the way it's done is pretty uncommon and pretty ahead of its time with the sports steroids and the kind of issues today. I mean, some people would call it definitely inoffensive, but the movie's intent is probably just to have a shock ending. I don't think its intent is to go out there and offend people. Remember, it was 1983-84 when this sucker was made, so I'm not defending it, but like I said, the commentary, they say exactly the same thing, and I pretty much have the same sentiments as they do. And what we have here is the special features. There's a bunch of them. Commentary track by Emmanuel Reyes and Bill Ackerman. Great commentary. The Winning Touch interview with actress Tracy Hildberg, formerly Lynn Banishek, Going for the Gold interview with actor Sean Masterson. Death on a Staircase interview with actor Michael O'Leary. A Great Day at the Office interview with actress Melissa Prophet. It's the taking part that counts, an interview with actress Spice Williams Crosby, who's done a bunch of movies. Cutting Gym Class, an interview with editor, associate producer Jonathan Braun. Archival artwork and behind the scenes photo gallery, original The Killing Touch style card, theatrical trailer, reversible sleeve, artwork, English subtitles. Yeah, tons of features on here, relatively short. All like 9-minute interviews with people where they talk about their experience, what they felt in the movie. Disappointed it didn't go through theaters, but pretty happy that it's getting rediscovered. And, we had a VHS day. Of course, it was Media VHS, which is, one of the kings of there. I'm trying to look if I see a Media VHS right off the top of my head here. But, Media, I'm seeing like Prism, Virgin, sort of Magnum, all sorts of stuff. Everything but Media, to be honest, which is funny. But, yeah, Media was a very popular, label, of course, for horror films, and they go into that in the special features as well. But this is a lot of fun. The elements were kind of like shaky, but they go over everything. Great commentary, really fun slasher film from 84, 83, who the fuck knows? Got to go Internet Movie Database. But if it does change to 84, I will not be recovering it. I'll probably just post this review in its place because I can only watch the same movies 5 or 6 fucking times in a row and whatnot. This is like probably the third time I've seen Fatal Games, but good stuff. Excellent slasher movie, especially if you haven't seen this one. I think you'll enjoy it. Okay, the next one from 1983 is the second directed Paul Naschy movie of the year, and this is The Beast and the Magic Sword from Mondo Macabro release here. Excellent fucking movie. This is a great one. This is probably kind of like, some people consider it the last Vladimir Danininski Paul Naschy werewolf movie. He also directed Panic Beats this year, which is a pretty fun movie. And this is an odd kind of choice here. This is a Japanese-Spanish co-production, and it's very similar to the movie Human Beast that Paul Naschy did, the kind of crime exploitation kind of film from 1980. But, this one here, this is a second time watch for me here, and it's infamous for the werewolf vs. tiger scene. Move over, Fulci, right? Shark vs. zombie, no, but the werewolf vs. tiger scene is fucking bonkers. So Paul Naschy, Daninsky, has the werewolf curse, right? And he's traveled to many places. In the beginning, we have like this whole epic kind of background story of, this film's almost 2 hours, where we learn his original origin story of this werewolf character. And you're like, okay, so then we fast forward and he's trying to find this cure, and it's still a period piece in the 1600s. And, there's this Jewish man trying to help him, and he's kind of killed by these guys that feel like he's committing kind of black magic, and he tells him you must travel to Japan. There's one man there that can help you. So he takes his wife of sorts with him, and the helper of this blind helper that was loyal to the man who's just died, and they go to Japan to meet this practitioner of magics and sorts, and he's a samurai, and he serves his lord and whatnot. And right when he gets there, the werewolf attacks happen, and they're pretty gratuitous. Paul Naschy's running around ripping off girl shirts a la Nightmare City or Berto Lenzi style, right before they kill the women. There's one scene where he rips off this woman's shirt and then bites her neck. I'm like, that's such exploitation, stuff. Naschy was keeping that gothic stuff alive, like the Hammer style stuff, but which is a little bit more nudity and pushing the envelope a little further, but it was still that old school mentality that was kind of getting dated at the time, right? We've talked about Naschy before, especially in the early 80s, right? That kind of dying thing here. And then when Spain had that, the dictator die, it was a little bit more open market, and there's no real room for the Naschy werewolf films anymore, right? But, so he basically is trying to find a cure for this, and he'll do anything to find it. They bring up the old, classic, Lon Chaney, right? It has to be somebody who loves you to finally kill you, right? Or your soul will be damned. That's the classic, universal kind of method, and I think they adopt that as well in the American Werewolf in London, if I'm not mistaken, or at least it's mentioned on the television, right? But so that element here where Naschy's trying to find a cure, but he's every once in a while he'll rip apart a bunch of people, entertaining. At the same storyline, we have our samurai kind of character running in with a general that he does not like, and there's also this whole element of like kind of this ghost kind of witch woman who wants the werewolf to use him for use the werewolf for her own gains, right? We have this kind of classic ghost story, and we have our own character samurai having his own showdown with this really cool kind of ghost and monster kind of element here. But it's going to end kind of as you expect. There's a couple moments that pop out where you're like, that was a little weird and wonky, but for the most part, I think that The Beast and the Magic Sword is a great kind of werewolf East meets West kind of rarity, right? How many Spanish Japanese co-production horror movies are there? We have, of course, Human Beast and stuff, and there's got to be a couple more. But on the special features here, we got a great commentary by the Naschy guys, the Naschy cast, Ron Barnett and Troy Gwynn, who always do an excellent job, and they talk about how this got kind of made, and how Naschy had a friend in Japan and how they had this connection and everything, and about his passing. Interview with author Gavin Bad Eli, and then we have the Smile the Wolf interview with Paul Naschy, and then we have an introduction by Paul Naschy. He talks about how this movie came together and where he was, and overall great special features for an excellent movie here. And I thought we had like that there's a long kind of deal on here that's like in Spanish. It's like 40 minutes long, so maybe it's a special. But as well, excellent one from 1983. Couple werewolf kind of oriented films here. We had a bunch in 81, of course, with The Howling and American Werewolf in London and Wolf Hour and Wolfen, lycanthrope kind of style things. And, even Naschy, I think. Did Naschy had one in 82? No, it was 81 too, I think, isn't it? The little kind of monsters one. I can't remember if it was 81 or 82. Good Night, Mr. Monster. But fun movie. But yeah, this is kind of the last time a lot of people say this would be the best way for Nashi to go out in the Daninsky character, but there's a couple more kind of ones made, one in the 90s and one by Fred Olen Ray as well. But, the kind of heyday here of like the 9 big films, maybe more. I can't remember exactly how many Daninsky werewolf movies there are. He does appear as a werewolf in other movies, like I said, Goodnight Mr. Monster and Howl of the Devil, which are not necessarily part of this series. But yeah, good stuff. Highly recommended. Looks great in Blu-ray. It's only in Spanish, though. Was not dubbed over. But check this one out if you want to see like that mixture of samurai and werewolf, which is a great mixture. And that gothic stuff, too. Love it. Okay, this is a real oddball movie here, and I don't even know how to tackle it considering the fact that the quality was so fucking horrible. And this is called Werewolf Tom from the USSR, or Latvia at the time, but it was USSR then. And this is 1983, and this is an oddball one. This is like partially historic film here, where we follow these 3 brothers that somehow learn to train wolves. And this is just from reading the description, because I didn't even gather that necessarily from watching it. And they kind of use it to their advantage to trick these rich landlords that are evil. In the very beginning, this old man tries to stop this woman from being raped, and he is killed, and then the brothers kind of step in, one of them, and hurts this guy, and that kind of puts them everybody kind of after these guys, but they make it somehow look like they're like turning into these wolves by training them and whatnot and hiding out in the woods and wilderness. So that's kind of the element what's going on here. But this one it's similar to something like The Ensign's Woods or Lokis, both from 1970, but not necessarily in the same vein, because those have more Lokis has a supernatural element where it's very vague, and I also would put this in the same kind of category as Wolf Hour from 1981. So these kind of like loose werewolf movies that have a lot of folklore and kind of strange mythology about them, but though may not even be supernatural in their aspects, but they're definitely kind of horror adjacent or horror oriented. As far as this one's concerned, I watched it with subtitles from YouTube, which weren't necessarily great, and on top of that, it even had this layer of kind of where it would like do the dub over and rush it on top of that, so it just hurt the performances. So I can't give this a fair shake. I could tell it was interesting enough. The picture quality looked bad, but I'm glad I got the chance to watch it and see kind of where this was coming from, and I had heard about it before, but just what I took away from it, I was like, man, the locations are cool, the story is cool, but I can't grasp a lot of the dialogue and everything about it. But it's kind of a miss only for the fact that the quality, what I had to work with, was not necessarily great. I definitely would rewatch this and probably have some more appreciation for it, but it's definitely an interesting kind of curio movie here. Werewolf Tom, will not pronounce the Latvian or USSR name. Okay, this next one here is a Taiwan-South Korea co-production, and this is called Evil Hits Home. It's definitely got, your possession, kind of ghost story angle, revenge story, martial arts story, and of course a comedy angle, because most kind of ghost stories from this early time period from those countries typically have a comedy element, especially Taiwan and stuff of that nature. So Evil Hits Home. It's very standard at first, where we have this guy coming home and his parents are both butchered, and he's screaming, and he gets killed himself by a gang of like 6 kind of like just ruthless assholes. They all have very unique looks, where we have like a skinny gaunt guy, a big muscular guy with a weird ponytail kind of thing, a little short kind of troll man, and we have like a flamboyant kind of gay character, which is very typical in a lot of martial arts movies. You see them pop up in the Shaw Brother movies, typically as villains, or and that nature. So that's like the kind of 4 that stand out, and they're working for this kind of rich kind of lord in the area. He's not a very nice guy, obviously. So this guy's killed, and one guy who's kind of similar, kind of standing in the village, all of a sudden becomes kind of sick, and he's realized he's kind of not feeling well. He's possessed by this guy who wants to get revenge. So quickly he starts to pick off these guys. He takes out a couple of them right off the beginning and everything like that. And of course the Lord is really pissed off at this element, so he sends out his guys, and there's this whole side story about these kind of 3 comedic characters. We have these 2 kind of like, I guess like you call them like fake ghost snatcher kind of characters, or they're kind of schemers. They're like standing on the side of the road trying to rob people, or they're becoming fake shamans to try to collect money as well. And we also have a silly kind of like line with the kind of night watchman, which if you watch movies like I can't think of the oddity from the 81, where I think it's 81, where we have like the night watchman getting scared of a ghost and there's like eggs floating and shit. I can't remember that movie exactly, from Hong Kong, Taiwan, but it's very much in that vein, where the night watchman is just getting like goofy character, everybody laughing at him for being afraid of ghosts at night. But we have that possession angle where he comes in, the character, and he starts picking off these people. There's a really kind of great fight scene scene amongst the four remaining kind of goons and baddies, and the baddies are pretty memorable, to be honest. And we kind of go through that element when the comedy does bog it down, but we do have really good kind of fun moments that kind of spice it up until the very climactic moment of the film, right? And I think the climactic like last 15 minutes is pretty strong, except the very, very ending is aggravating. It reminds me a lot of the kind of classic Japanese, ghost story from the Radiance films put out the second set on Dai. I can't remember the title, but the ending where I have this whole revenge story, right? And we don't get that last, cathartic revenge point, and that happens in this one as well, which kind of blows my fucking mind, right? Because this movie is not that same kind of lesson movie like that Radiance Dai Japanese ghost story. This is more of a just fun kind of martial arts comedy horror kind of deal. So you're like, wait, we're just stopping there? That's a little odd. But the showdown, of course, which you absolutely have to have in these movies, right? You have to have that possession showdown where we have the ghost getting his revenge, evil hits evil, during the shaman, and the shaman's really memorable here. She looks awesome. She kind of mixes martial arts here. Reminds me a little bit of Hex, the Shaw Brothers movies, kind of how that character's like almost like seductive in a weird kind of fucking way, and they're kind of ceremony. But then we have a nice little showdown here that has some weird violent moments and everything like that. And the party scene that's attacked because people are being possessed are dying left and right. That's very good stuff. Overall, I think Evil Hits Evil was a little bit better than I expected it to be. I was like, oh, this would be a pretty average kind of ghost story, maybe subpar 5 or something, and I'm like coming in at like 6.5, 7. I enjoyed it, and I think that end piece was something a little bit more spectacular, was really cool, and I enjoyed the villains. I'm always a sucker for weird looking odd villains, and this movie has a ton of them. It has 4 of them, and they're all 6 of them or whatever, and like 4 of them stand out. And the main bad guy is such a fucking dickhead that you just want him to die almost immediately. There is, of course, like a rape scene in here amongst the ghosts kind of attacking and whatnot. That's in here, so if that bothers you, of course, it's not obviously pleasant, but it's shot kind of in an artistic way, and kind of the shadows and everything like that. But overall, I thought Evil Hits Evil was pretty damn good, especially for like a lot of these kind of lesser known, like Taiwan co-productions. Sometimes they're really tedious and bad, but the subtitles were good on this one, and overall decent, solid movie. Okay, the Patreon pick here is Club Dread, and this is the Broken Lizards Club, of course, 2004. Now, this is a DVD. I didn't watch the director's cut because I remember originally watching this and being incredibly disappointed with this damn thing. This was almost 2 hours long director's cut. Hell, even the theatrical cut's like 1 hour and 44 minutes, and that's the one I did watch. So I really loved Beer Fest, and I really loved Super Troopers. Super Troopers came out, and I adored it, and then this one came out, and I didn't love it. I remember being really disappointed. I was like, oh, a slasher movie. I love slashers. I love these guys. And then when Beer Fest came out, I loved that one too. So somebody picked this one, and I was really looking forward to going back and revisiting. And Bill Paxton's anniversary came up of his death, and I was like, this is perfect to watch a Bill Paxton one. So R.I.P. Bill Paxton. He plays Coconut Pete, which is by far the funniest and greatest character in this movie. And I must say, I actually enjoyed this one a lot more than I did initially. So it's an oddball. It's definitely a product of its time, but it's a throwback to other movies. And you only really could have done it in 2004 because we got that kind of element of the sex comedy coming back, right, with American Pie, and it's probably even late for that. We have the kind of a slasher kind of deal where it's a throwback to the 80s slasher movies, and then we have the Broken Lizards kind of guys who are kind of like seem a little improv-y, the 5 of them from these movies, just kind of playing these bizarre characters. They're all come back, Kevin Hafferman, and I can't remember the other actors' names, but all funny and all different kind of characters, completely different from the last characters they played, right? We don't have a Farva or a Mac or something like that, but what it is we have these people that are throwing on this amazing kind of crazy kind of island party where everybody shows up, and Coconut Pete is the host. He's like the big not country singer, but he's kind of the Jimmy Buffett of it all, right? And there's a great gag in there involving Pina Colada Berg, and it's just one of the best moments with Bill Paxton. But people start to get picked off, and they got to keep it on the down low, or they're all going to be picked off quicker. And that's kind of the just do your job and don't tell anyone. They start the workers here start getting picked off and killed, and the main Broken Lizards Club all play oddball, weird kind of characters. There's a element of sleaze and sex comedy and nudity in this movie as well, which I think kind of sets it apart from a lot of its other kind of slasher movies here. A lot of the slashers, they were bringing back a lot of gore at this time, stuff like we get like 2005, 6, 7. You start getting stuff like Severance and Tripper, and just a little bit more violent, kind of funny, weird, kind of over the top kind of slasher films. And this one, I don't know if there was one before this, but this one definitely leans really heavy into the comedy and absurdity, and I think it works for it. I actually found myself enjoying this one a lot. At times I'm like, I don't know if I like that, but then I catch myself cracking up and laughing, and I like the cast. I think they do all a pretty damn good job from everybody involved here. I just think the guy who plays the director, Jay Checker, his character's just my least favorite because he's just a little bit too over the top, honestly. But this one has the right kind of weird mixture that I just felt like I didn't appreciate at the time, and I have grown to kind of enjoy this, and I kind of just get it a little bit more and realize how unique it was when it came out. Now, unique doesn't necessarily mean great, but I think that rewatching this one, I definitely think it's worth your time to kind of give it a revisit and check it out. I think it's better than I remembered, and I think some of the jokes land better, and I think that the special effects are fun, and I think the structure is a little bit fun too, how they open up with that kind of element right here where they're given all these red herrings in almost comedic ways, and we have like not the linear structure kind of going here, and we come back to that stuff. Overall, I would recommend Club Dread. I would recommend, giving it a spin, and I didn't get a chance to listen to the commentaries, and I would watch the theatrical version because the movie's pushing its runtime at an hour 44 already, and just maybe, if you really love it, watch the director's cut, which probably has more gratuitous nudity and violence and whatnot, but pretty fun movie here, Club Dread, and R.I.P. Bill Paxton, a great performance in here. You must mean Peter Coladaberg. He's absolutely fucking hilarious in here as this kind of sleazy guy. MC Gainey's in here as well as the Broken Lizards Club. But good film. Recommend this one. Oh, Jordan Ladd too from Cabin Fever. Great cast, fun movie. Check out Club Dread. Good stuff. All right, let's get into these questions, comments, and concerns. We got Nick from Flanders. Hair high seems like a boatload of giggles. It also brings back memories of your long hair, sir, and mine. But once the gray sets in, it's best to chop it off, right? Yes, there does seem to be a renewed love for all things 50s. Our 50s, the new 80s, when it comes to nostalgia. I mean, I feel like the 50s are, the 80s are a reflection of the 50s. So, also Justin Long voicing an a-hole character back in 2004. He does seem like he likes portraying douchebags. He's good at it. Not that he's a douchebag, but I'm just saying. I really like Sweet 16. I definitely did not see the ending coming, nor did the lads of the Hysteria Continues, apparently, when they first saw it. I hope your Sweet 16 party was less bloody, Dave. Man, I don't remember my Sweet 16 birthday party, and I didn't certainly call it a Sweet 16. Had you been a 50s teen, which cliche would you have fitted in with? I have no idea. I don't know. I'd have to live through the time and feel how I felt and see where I was raised. It's all circumstantial. Who's your favorite 50s director when it comes to horror? I mean, Roger Corman did a couple in the 50s. I got to go with my buddy Roger Corman here, although it was a lot of sci-fi and stuff. And I would go with Corman. I know, even though the 50s stuff is really B-rated, and I don't even think he started getting into the good stuff that he did until the 60s with the Poe stuff. But yeah, I'll go with Corman anyways because I appreciate Corman a lot. Or I could go with, the guy who did Incredible Shrinking Man and Revenge of the Creature from the Black Lagoon, Jack. Oh, geez, why the fuck am I forgetting his name? I know somebody's screaming at me right now. Jack. Fucking Jack. Creature from the Black Lagoon, and I think he did Tarantula. Jack Arnold. Is that right, guys? Help me out here, but I'd go with him. And my brain, I do all these things off the top of my head, so I'm not getting any younger. How many more Scream movies do you think they'll make? The franchise is getting a bit tired, if you ask me. I haven't even watched past 3, guys. I just get weird in these franchise. Scream is not my franchise. I don't hate them, but I just haven't had the time to keep watching these. So, and then we have till next week, God willing. P.S. Life isn't perfect, but your hair can be. What, you want me to grow my hair? I don't understand. Oh, hair high reference. But Green Donut Girl. Duel to the Death has always been my gold standard when judging other martial arts films. The ninjas flying in on kites, popping out of the sand, flying through a forest, carrying the Ark of the Covenant, the giant ninja breaking the normal-sized ninja. Just love the over-the-top goofiness the same way I love Euro spy movies over the actual Bond films. Some of the Shaw Brothers films have come close, but I haven't seen one that tops Duel. Not bad for the first time film director as well. Yeah. I agree. It's a lot of fun. I do like a lot more Shaw Brothers things. I like a lot of the Shaw Brothers contemporary in their horror films, but not necessarily the same thing as Duel to the Death. No More Room in Hell podcast. I believe the first Van Damme movie I saw in theaters was the original Universal Soldier. As far as remakes are of existing IP, what I don't understand is why their perception is that there is room for a creepy neighborhood movie, and why isn't there a perception there's room for a creepy neighborhood movie, in this case TV show, without attaching the Burbs to it? Why even needlessly slap a stigma onto it from the jump? I would agree, right? It's like you already condemn it, but probably wouldn't get the funding without the name either, so it's a double-edged sword. Action Papa, you're the only YouTuber who can review a Van Damme and a deaf crocodile movie all in the same video, and do it really well. You are a fucking man. You are the fucking man, and your reviews are second to none. I appreciate that. I don't always do a great job, but I do a job. Real Moody, I love Double Impact. It's one of my favorite Van Damme movies. Yep. Good one. I enjoy Double Impact as well. I love Van Damme, especially from that time. Way Up Dude gives me a thumbs up. Thank you. James Gray, thank you. You enjoyed your review of Breathless. Thank you as well for watching. And Kadam1472, Tom Noonan also passed away. R.I.P. Tom Noonan. So many people dying, and that's a shame. Tom Noonan is definitely one of those actors that just didn't really get the appreciation he deserved. He was always fantastic, always great. You know, he's like the director. You always hear the directors talk about him. They're always so fond of him because he's such a good fucking job, right? And hell, Tom Noonan, wasn't he? He actually was in A Voice in Hair Hide. I think he was. Yeah. This is the kind of problems right here. It's just like boom. But or he was a voice in one of his films. He worked with Bill Plimpton, I think, once. Is it Hair High? So this is what happens when you get old. You never know what the hell's going on. But yeah, let's just do the update relatively quick. I had this on a regular Blu-ray, but the sale special edition was relatively good price, so I grabbed this Idle Hands collector's edition from Scream Factory. You know, I've never seen Idle Hands. I know, right? Everybody's like, oh, it's so good, it's so great. I've never seen it. Maybe I'll rectify that and give it a spin. But yeah, guys, we're out of here. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching, and as always, have a good one.